There is a difference between being sad and being depressed. Sadness has an address. It comes from somewhere. You can point to it. You lost someone. Something didn't work out. An expectation was broken. Sadness hurts, but it has a shape. It has a beginning you can recognize. Depression is different. It doesn't need a visible reason to exist. It doesn't arrive announced with a clear cause you can show someone and say, "Look, it's because of this." It is simply there, a weight you wake up carrying without knowing exactly when it started. A fog that settled in gradually, so slowly that you didn't even notice the exact moment the light began to dim. And perhaps the hardest part isn't even the weight itself. It's trying to explain to someone who doesn't feel what you feel. It's hearing, but you have so many good things in your life. It's receiving the advice of try to think positive. It will pass. Everyone has bad days. As if what you are living through were just a rough patch that a little gratitude could fix. But you know it isn't that. You know because you've already tried thinking positive. You've already tried to cheer yourself up. You've already tried to force yourself to go out, to move, to do the things that used to bring joy, and that now feel like tasks completed on autopilot, without the flavor they once had, and none of it changed what is there inside. This video is not here to tell you that all you need is a shift in perspective. It is not here to offer you a list of 5 habits that will transform your mood. It is not here to minimize what you are living through with phrases that sound nice but don't reach the place where you actually are. This video is here to stay with you for a while, to recognize what you are feeling as real, as valid, as something that deserves to be treated with the same seriousness you would give any other condition that affects your body and your life. Because that is what depression is. It is not weakness. It is not lack of faith. It is not ingratitude. It is not you being dramatic or asking too much of life. It is a real condition that affects real people. Intelligent, deep, sensitive people who love greatly and care deeply. People exactly like you. And you deserve to be seen in this. Not fixed. Not rushed out of it. Seen. Let's talk about what happens inside you when depression is present. Not the clinical version. The human version. The one that lives in the body, in the days, in the small moments that used to feel simple, and that now seem to require a disproportionate amount of effort. You know that feeling of waking up already exhausted? Not the tiredness of poor sleep, the tiredness of existing, the tiredness that doesn't improve with rest because it doesn't come from the body, it comes from somewhere deeper that physical rest doesn't reach. You know the feeling of looking at things that used to bring you pleasure and feeling nothing? Not sadness, nothing, a kind of flat emptiness where there used to be texture, color, movement, as if someone turned down the volume on everything at once and you no longer know how to adjust it back. You know the feeling of being in a room full of people and feeling completely alone? Not because the people around you are bad, but because there is an invisible glass between you and the world that you can't explain and that no one else seems to be able to see. You know the feeling of having thoughts you didn't choose? Thoughts that arrive uninvited and that say things about you, about the future, about the meaning of everything, that you wouldn't believe in another moment, but that in this state seem absolutely true and absolutely inevitable. That is depression from the inside, and if you recognize something in that description, I want you to know something that needs to be said with complete clarity. What you are feeling is not the truth about who you are. It is a state, a real state, one that needs real attention, but a state, not a sentence, not a permanent identity, not what you will be forever. Depression lies. It lies about the future by saying it will always be this way. It lies about the past by saying nothing you lived through had real value. It lies about the present by saying there is nothing here worth holding on to. It lies about you by saying that you are the problem, that you are the burden, that the world would be better or simpler without the complexity of what you carry. Those are lies. Sophisticated, convincing lies that arrive in the voice of your own mind so they feel like truths, but they are lies. And one of the most important things you can do right now is learn to recognize the voice of depression as separate from your own voice, to notice when it is you thinking and when it is the state thinking through you. It isn't easy, especially when the state is intense, but it is possible. And that distinction, however small it seems, opens a crack of light in a place that felt completely sealed. Now I need to talk about something that rarely appears in spiritual conversations about depression, something that needs to be said with honesty and without romanticization. Depression needs real care, not just meditation, not just gratitude, not just videos like this one, however genuine they may be. When what you are living through is intense, when the thoughts become very heavy, when the sense of emptiness doesn't lift with time, you deserve professional support, a therapist, a psychiatrist, someone trained to walk with you through this territory in a way that a video never can. Seeking help is not weakness. It is the most courageous and most loving act you can do for yourself. And spirituality and professional care are not opposites. They complement each other. One addresses the clinical, chemical, neurological dimension of what is happening. The other addresses the dimension of meaning, presence, and reconnection with something larger than the pain of the moment. You deserve both. With that said, let's talk about what the spiritual perspective has to offer in this territory, not as a substitute for professional care, as companionship, as a different way of looking at what is happening that can coexist with any other care you are seeking or need to seek. There is an ancient tradition in many cultures that viewed periods of inner darkness not as failures, not as punishments, not as evidence that something was wrong with the person, but as initiations, passages, moments when the soul is being reorganized at a level deeper than ordinary consciousness can follow, moments when the old structure is being undone so that something new can emerge, not because pain is necessary as punishment, but because certain transformations only happen in the dark. Just as a seed germinates in the darkness of the earth before any visible sign appears on the surface, medieval alchemists called this process nigredo, the black phase, the moment when everything seems to dissolve, lose form, lose meaning. They understood that the nigredo was not the end of the process, it was the beginning. It was the necessary condition for real transmutation to occur. I am not saying your depression is a blessing in disguise. I am not saying you should be grateful for it. I am not romanticizing pain. I am saying there is a way of being in this territory that is different from fighting against it with all the strength you have, which generally increases suffering, and different from surrendering to it as if it were the final truth about your life, which is what depression wants you to believe. There is a third way, which is being present in what is happening without fully identifying with it, which is recognizing the state without becoming the state, which is saying this is here right now without saying this is me forever. That distinction seems small when you are in the middle of the darkness, but it is enormous, because it keeps a part of you, however small, outside the narrative that depression is constructing. And that part, that small part, that can still observe what is happening without being completely consumed by it, is the thread that connects you to the other side. Let me share something that neuroscience has discovered in recent years that completely changes the way we understand depression. The depressed brain is not a broken brain. It is a brain that got stuck in a pattern, a specific activation pattern, specific neural connections, habitual ways of processing information that consolidated over time until they became the default mode of operation. And here is what that means in practice. It means the state is not permanent because patterns can change. Neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to create new connections, to establish new patterns, to literally reorganize itself in response to new experiences and new forms of attention, that capacity does not disappear with depression. It may be suppressed, it may be slower, it may require external support to be activated, but it is there. What this means is that every small action that goes against the pattern of depression, however small, is literally contributing to creating new pathways in the brain, not dramatically or immediately, but in a real and cumulative way. Getting out of bed when every cell in your body wants to stay lying down, drinking a glass of water, opening a window, responding to a message you had been avoiding, taking a 5-minute walk, eating something even without hunger. These acts don't seem large, and they aren't, but each one is a small victory against the pattern. Each one is as your nervous system receiving a different signal than usual, and different signals, repeated consistently even with difficulty, create different patterns over time. You don't need to do everything. You don't need to transform yourself overnight. You don't need to escape depression through willpower, because depression affects exactly your capacity for willpower. You only need the next minimum possible step, the smallest possible one. Small enough that it is hard to refuse, and then the next one, and then the next. Not because they will fix everything immediately, but because they keep you moving, and movement, even when it is minuscule, is the opposite of the paralysis that depression wants to impose on you. Write this in the comments right now. I am here, I am still here, and that is enough for today, because it is. Being here today, however difficult this day has been, is enough. You didn't need to have defeated depression today. You didn't need to have been well today. You didn't need to have been productive or positive or inspired. You only needed to be here, and you are. That matters more than depression wants you to believe. I want to talk about loneliness, because depression and loneliness have a specific relationship that needs to be named. Depression isolates, not because you consciously choose isolation, but because the state makes connection with others difficult in a way that is hard to explain to someone who hasn't felt it. You don't want to be a burden. You don't want to have to explain what you are feeling when you don't fully know yourself. You don't want to perform well-being that doesn't exist, and so you pull back, or you stop responding, or you say you are fine when you aren't. And isolation feeds depression. It is a cycle that feeds itself in a way that can seem impossible to interrupt from the inside. But there is something that science shows consistently about the factors that help in recovering from depressive states, and connection is always among the most important. Not perfect connection, not connection where you have to be well, or explain everything, or be the best version of yourself. Simple connection. The presence of another person, a conversation that doesn't need to resolve anything, the feeling that someone knows you are here and cares about that. If there is one person in your life, just one, with whom you can be honest about what you are feeling, that person is worth more right now than any technique or practice you could do alone. You don't need to have the right words. You don't need to present your state in a coherent and articulate way. You can simply say, I am not okay, and I need someone to know that. That is enough. That is courageous. That is an act of self-love disguised as vulnerability. And if there is no such person right now, if the isolation has gone far enough that you can't identify anyone like that, then seeking professional support becomes even more urgent and even more important, because you deserve to have someone by your side in this process, not as a sign of weakness, as a sign that you care enough about your own life to seek what it needs. I want to talk about something that is perhaps the most counterintuitive part of everything being said here. Depression frequently appears in people who felt too much for too long without having a safe space to process what they felt. People who learned early to put the needs of others before their own, who learned that their emotions were too much, that they felt too intensely, that they needed to be smaller so that the people around them could feel comfortable, who carried responsibilities that were not theirs, guilt that didn't belong to them, expectations that were never negotiated. Depression, in many cases, is not the system breaking. It is the system reaching the limit of what it can carry without support. It is the body and the mind saying, in a way that can no longer be ignored, that something needs to change, that something needs to be seen, that something needs attention that has been postponed for too long. I am not saying depression is a simple message with a simple solution. It isn't. I am saying that beneath the state, beneath the chemistry, beneath the neural patterns, there is frequently a story of someone who went far beyond their own limits for a long time, who gave much more than they received, Who got lost in the process of trying to be what others needed? And that story deserves to be heard. It deserves to be treated with care. It deserves the space and the time and the support to be processed in a way that didn't happen while you were in the middle of living it. Recovery is not linear. This point needs to be stated clearly, because the non-linearity of recovery is one of the things that most discourages people who are trying to come out of a depressive state. You have a better day, and then a terrible day, and it feels like you went back to zero. It feels like all the progress was lost. It feels like this proves it won't work, that you won't get better, that the darkness is permanent after all. But that is not how recovery works. It is not a straight line upward. It is more like a spiral. You pass through the same territory several times, but each time you pass through it, you do so at a slightly different level. With a little more understanding, with a little more resource, with a little more distance between yourself and the state. The bad day after better days is not evidence that you failed. It is part of the process. It is the territory being integrated in depth, not just on the surface. And every time you get through a bad day and still continue, every time you feel the darkness return and still take the next minimum step, you are building something that depression cannot take from you. You are building proof that you can. Not once, repeatedly, even when it is hard, even when it seems impossible, even when the voice of depression says it isn't worth trying. You try anyway, and that quiet and imperfect persistence is one of the deepest forms of courage that exists. There is something I want you to take from this video. Not a technique, not a system. A question you can ask yourself today, tomorrow, in the difficult days that are still to come, not because it will fix everything, but because it will keep a small light burning that depression will try to extinguish. The question is, what do I need right now? Not what I should need. Not what would be easier for the people around me. What do I genuinely need right now, in this moment, on this day? Sometimes the answer will be rest. Sometimes it will be movement. Sometimes it will be human contact. Sometimes it will be silence. Sometimes it will be crying without trying to stop. Sometimes it will be asking for help. Sometimes it will simply be existing without demanding anything of yourself beyond being alive and present in this moment. Depression disconnects you from your own needs. It dulls access to what you need at the same time that it makes everything harder to access. That is why this question, simple as it seems, is an act of reconnection. It is you trying to listen to yourself in a state where listening to yourself is difficult. You don't need to have the perfect answer. You don't need to act immediately on the answer. Just asking is already an act of self-care. And self-care, however small, is the opposite direction from depression. I want to talk about hope, not the superficial hope that sounds like you'll be fine soon without any real foundation, but the hope that has roots, the kind that is based on something concrete. People come out of depression, not all in the same way, not all in the same time, not all by the same path, but they come out. People who were exactly where you are, who felt what you are feeling, who believed it would always be this way, found the other side, not because they were stronger than you, not because they had an easier life, but because they kept going, even when it was hard, even when it seemed pointless, even when the voice of depression was louder than any other voice available. They kept going, and on the other side they found something that was not just the absence of pain. They found a version of themselves that the darkness had made possible, a depth, a compassion, a capacity to be with the suffering of others in a way that only exists in those who have known their own suffering up close, not because the pain was good, but because the crossing built something real. Your crossing is building something real too, even if you can't see it right now, even if the only visible sign is that you are still here, even if all you managed today was to open this video and stay until now. That is real. That counts. That is part of what is being built. And if the thoughts become very heavy, if the darkness reaches a point where you feel you cannot continue, please reach out for help now. A mental health professional, a crisis line, someone you trust. You deserve real support for what you are living through. This space, this quiet blue hour, will be here for you, not as a solution to everything, as presence, as a place you can return to on the days when the weight is too great to carry alone. You are not alone in this, even if it feels that way, even if depression makes that seem like the only available truth. You are not. Stay here. That is the only thing that matters today.